Over the past 10 years, hell, even arguably longer, I have had various people, it could be a relative, an associate, even someone I've spoken to just one time or a few more times, say that there is going to be a woman who appears that to some degree is very different from all the ones I've encountered before. Now in the past, when I was in, high school for example, I had a relative who would say, "Oh, you'll meet someone that reciprocates your interest." He didn't say it like that, but just basically, you'll meet someone that likes you back. And I didn't at the time think it was that much of a stretch. But as I, over the last, I'd say 6, 7, 8 years, have really started to kind of drift away from just wanting to go on a date, and just really have seen the stock of having a, in quotation marks, girlfriend sort of plummet. I want a lot more than what I wanted back then, which goes back to this idea of what's the point of asking out women if they're against getting married, having children. If you know that going in, then why even bother? But I have these people who now, whether it's this relative or even when I used to talk to her triple L, will say that you're going to meet a woman and she's going to be so different from all the past ones and want to do all the different things you want to do, want to get married, want to have kids, and just it's a fairy tale, a real life fairy tale. And the first issue I have with it is I really think it removes a lot of my agency. When I was working for one of the 2 customer service jobs I had this year, they had this thing called the law of averages, where they believe, for example, if you knock on 80 to 100 doors a day, your chances of selling several of their item will be increased by the sheer number of doors you're knocking on. Now, when I was in 11th, 12th grade, this is where I made I don't want to call it a transition, but just really stopped even trying to ask out girls I went to school with. I more so was online. Reddit used to have their R for R section, which was basically where a bunch of women would go and say, "Oh, I don't have anyone to talk to, and this is what I'm into, and message me if this also appeals to you." And I would speak to, I'd say on average, several of them a week. And more often than not, this would end with the person normally ghosting me, but sometimes they get mad at something you wrote or said and then just disengage. And the reason I bring this up is to say that if we're going off of the law of averages, I don't see why the hell it would make any sense to believe that during the period where I was most trying to speak to one of them for that purpose of getting a date, having whatever romantic crap, you would get like nothing out of it, right? But then the period where you're not even concerned with them, not talking to them, suddenly one of them is magically going to show up and be so much better than all the others. And it's really ironic too, because that 2000, like, what was that, 2015, 16, like that period was followed up by the only girlfriend I ever had, which was this gold digger who I spoke to for a month, and then when I agreed to date her, she transformed into this begging monstrosity. And I guess what I'm getting at is, for me, that I don't even call it a romance, that relationship was so eye-opening in the sense that people for years hyped up being with a woman as this like amazing thing, and you ended up eventually being with one of them and finding out just how unfulfilling and lame it was. And if a person wants to make the argument that, oh, they're not all like that, I can say, well, this is kind of my point of how when you were going out and speaking to the largest number of them, it culminated in meeting one of the worst of them, or one that's just crappy. So if you're talking to only a few of them, or none, I don't know what better result you think I would get. But no, it's just one of those more extreme versions of telling someone, oh, they'll meet someone that likes them back, to where now you have to specifically tell them they're going to meet a woman who checks off all these different boxes. Because as I've said before, I am fundamentally not what I was 10 years ago. This is why I've actually turned down multiple chicks who have shown some kind of romantic desires towards me, usually for the same two reasons: they live too damn far away or they don't want to have kids. And I was, it's funny, I didn't even, when I made my video on why long distance relationships are dumb, I didn't mention this, but I've talked about how the only way you could get me to want to be willing to possibly date a woman that lives in some state that's very far away or another country altogether is if she was doing things that made it appear that she wanted to actually decrease the gap in distance between us. You have some couples, for example, where one will go to school in another state or another country, etc., and then they keep up with each other by typing stuff. And the idea is that they're away for the time being, but eventually they will be together physically as well. I mentioned during that video that there was this woman who gave me this whole romantic confession and whatnot, and I said, no thanks, I'm good. But what I didn't mention, and again, this is something I only thought about out in the last couple of weeks, is that she had told me that she had a, let's just call it, explicit encounter with this guy within the past year, and that one of the guys that she had dated before asking me out was also in this Discord server that we were both in. And I said, well, that kind of makes her look even more ridiculous, because the fact that she met a guy who she banged in real life shows that she can meet men in her country that she likes, certainly enough to do explicit things with, but that she chooses to go after and pursue men who are on the computer instead. Because like I said, I wasn't the first one that she tried to do this with. And I was sitting back and I was thinking to myself, why the hell would somebody go out of their way to date people that live so far away they can't touch them? But then I thought about it and I said, a lot of couples, when you think of like romantic stuff, but besides the physical things of just intercourse, you also think holding hands, just various other little gestures that are not necessarily over the top romantic. It's not stuff you would get in trouble for if you did it out in public, right? But I thought about this and I said, she basically wants to date men who she can call her boyfriend without actually having to do anything besides run her mouth. It is literally the laziest romance you could think of. Where, hey, I could date someone who, in my own region who, I could meet up with and like actually, go see a movie with and hold hands and bring back to my place. But I'd rather just be with people that I can't touch. That's a choice that she made, because like I said, she revealed that she had this explicit encounter with this guy within the past year. So she made a choice to switch from physical relationships with people that are actually in front of her to guys over the computer, which hey, we cracked the code on that one. But all this is to say that, I look at stuff like that and I say, okay, this is not what I find appealing. It's not something I really want to do. It's something that maybe, when I was really feeling the loneliest, again, 10 years ago, maybe I would have considered it. But at this point, it's just too little too late. And I always have this line about how I haven't asked out a woman in 4 years. This relative wasn't really able to comprehend why that's so significant. If you're able to get to a point with the opposite gender where you find them attractive, many of the members you think are pretty, you might even like speaking to several of them, but you just, for whatever set of reasons, never feel motivated to even bother intimating the idea that this could be romantic. That says a lot. That says that this group has jaded you so much that you wouldn't even waste your time asking one of them on a date, or, hey, do you want to upgrade this, or anything like that, because you look at it and you say, you know what, this is as far as I can go. I bring her up sometimes, but not that much. The woman that lived in another state who complimented me. You know, she and I would talk pretty frequently, and I said, "Hey, you know, you're struggling with your rent. I could come and stay with you." And of course, when I made my initial attempt to ask her out, I didn't know she didn't want to have children. What eventually happened was she kept kind of playing games. Like she would alternate between appearing to like me and then kind of just not really knowing what she wanted to do. And I just got sick of it. I said, you know what, man, I'm not even going to waste my time anymore trying to decipher her mind games. But I had this epiphany. I said, in the event that she had decided to, you know, let me move in with her and help her pay her rent, I might have been happy for a few days, a few weeks, hell, maybe even a month. But that inability to have a family, because that's not something she wanted to do, would eat away at me to where I would eventually resent her for it and just say, hey, this is not what I signed up for. And that's why that romance or attempt at a romance was the last time I asked one of them out, because for me it really seemed like things had reached a point of just, I hate using this phrase so much, levels of absurdity. You ask out a woman who you think is very attractive, and yes, she lives far away, but you know, you're willing to go to where she is. But oh, plot twist, she doesn't want to have children. And you had no way of knowing this before because she never mentioned that when you would speak to her for these hours long conversations. You have a woman who complains about her financial hardships, and you offer to assist her, but then she says she would prefer to stay this way. You know, it to me seemed like this is getting too stupid to keep participating in. I didn't really go in depth on the last woman that I was kind of pining for, but to give the briefest of overviews, we met in August of last year, which is kind of crazy to think about. If I speak to her for I think 2 or 3 more weeks, she will definitively break the record of being the longest woman out of any of the ones I've liked romantically that I've spoken to, period. Um, Even longer than Triple L. That's a hell of a thing to accomplish. I just wish the end result was better. But we met last year. We had similar things that we liked, and around January, when I started finding out more stuff about her, I started speaking to her more often, and I really thought that she liked talking to me. Eventually, what ended up happening was I found out that she had another account that she would post, let's just say, unsavory things on. Uh, and this account is one that she said she trusted the people who she was most friendly with to be on, right? The people who she felt were her actual friends. And yes, I sent a request to follow it, assuming that she would approve it. No such thing happened. And it didn't make any sense to me how someone could be so open about their, you know, personal life and struggles and all these other things that were very private, right? When I would speak to her in our direct exchanges, but then keep me out of an account where she would have her own, you know, separate postings about things on the site that she didn't want most people to see. The other thing that led to my just decision to say, you know what, this is not going anywhere, was that I sent her a private message, and it was basically what I was going to do with it was kind of propel things forward, where I would say, hey, I need to talk to you, it's very important. And then she would answer, you know, what is it? And I would ask for a number. And then if she gave it to me, we would continue. If she didn't, I would just back out anyway. But none of that ended up happening, because when I sent that private message of, hey, I need to talk to you, it's important, I received no reply. And at first I said, okay, I'm not one of these like crazed internet people that needs someone to respond every day. I waited a week, no response, 2 weeks, and then a month. And I said, you know, here's someone that's on this website almost every goddamn day, posting several times a day. And I'm supposed to believe that for an entire calendar month, she could not see or be bothered to respond to what I wrote. You've got to be kidding me. So those two things, the private account that I was locked out of, in spite of being told that I was someone who she trusted, or, you know, given all this different information about her that other people apparently didn't have, didn't make sense to me. And also the fact that I sent her a message and she didn't respond to it for an entire month. Those two things together just killed my desire to keep on speaking to her. And I said, you know, it's funny how like, again, I don't believe in the magic woman, but for me, she appeared to be that. She was someone who lived in the same state as me, about a 5 or 6 hour drive from where I am. Is not doing the whole gold digging thing, likes a lot of the same things that I like. Just I have no complaints about her whatsoever. Even the more unsavory stuff like her depression, all of these are things I get. So it was really sad to me to have that result occur. And I just kind of want to point this out. In a lot of ways, this is really the perfect series finale to me, asking out women, where it's like, here's someone who you got upset with, like their whole private account thing and then not respond to a DM. That's the kind of stuff that maybe the text message thing would have happened, but 10, 20, 30 years ago, there's no goddamn way that if you asked out a woman, you would find out in the plot twist that she has another account that only certain people have access. That's the kind of stuff where it really shows you how much the internet and these computers have just destroyed relationships, where they've allowed people to basically wear multiple masks, and even when it starts slipping, they're still able to be like, oh well, see, I don't even have to be accountable for the fact that I told this guy I trust him, but then I don't trust him to look at the stuff I'm writing on this other account. And what tends to happen with me is that if something looks like it's going to be different from what happened before, but then it just turns out to be more of the same, I get the most disillusioned. Like with this job situation, I really thought the delivery driver position was going to be different, because this is a place where you get 10-hour shifts at a minimum. And even though they were talking about part-time at first, they seemed to backtrack on that as more people were dropping out of there. I wasn't experienced with doing it, but I was willing to learn. And I really went into it with enthusiasm. And what essentially happened was it turned out to be a remake of my time at Pizza Hut, where you're given an extremely thin amount of time to learn something before they start threatening to get you out of there after being disappointed in your performance, in spite of how little training you've had up to when they started getting upset. So with her, it's so sad to have had things turn out the way they did, because this is probably the closest of any of the women I've met over the last 4 years, to being what I would consider not perfect, right? I don't believe in that, but in terms of just being the closest to that ideal, right? That magic woman that they've prophesized, right? She appeared to possibly be that, and then she turned out to not be. And I have to mention this. I love the fact that I still got to keep my record of not asking one of them out in 4 years, because I was trying to, kind of like a slow burn, where first you get the phone number, then you actually try to set up some kind of meeting. And because she never responded to the message, I didn't have to get to the point of asking, like directly asking her out. So that's why I think it's like the most comical that because of just how much these computers allow people to just ignore those that they claim to like or care about. I still got to keep my record and didn't even directly get to the point of asking something that would have propelled things forward, because she's not interested in doing anything that changes her situation. This is the same person who admits that she's been struggling financially for 10 years for things that are, in my opinion, not her fault, but really no game plan of how this is going to stop happening. And she clearly was not interested in meeting in person or doing anything that entails getting off the computer, because, like I said, she knows where I am and chose not to take me up on that. But it's really a matter of, like, for me, I go on here and meet people because of like a void that's in real life. She does that also, but the difference is that if someone physically is close to me that I meet online, I'm open to meeting in person. Whereas with her, she's even talked about just wanting to sit in her bedroom and like being confined to not wanting to leave her room just because of, the supposed mental health issues. So this was par for the course. And what I thought was so funny about, just for two examples, right, with Triple L and then with this relative. With Triple L, back when I speak to her, she said that she believed I would prematurely cut off a woman who was interested in me. And I've always gone back to that phrase, because when you say nebulous things, you can always get out of having to take a definitive stance. So like if I talk to a woman for 2 months and then I say, all right, this is stupid. Is that premature? If I talk to a woman for a year, is that premature? They don't have to give any defined dates of how long this nonsense is supposed to go on, because she's basically saying you don't have a right to stop speaking to a woman that you don't see things improving with. You're supposed to just be at her beck and call, and to hell with you being able to have your own choices. With this relative, what I thought was funny about him, and this same person that said I was selling myself short and they might surprise you, he described this last woman, the one that I didn't even get to ask out because the whole private account thing, and then also not respond to my message. He called her something so vulgar, I don't even want to say it. Like it was 2 curse words in a 3-word insult, and I thought it was so funny because this is what, like, I see such great irony in telling someone, magic woman will show up, you'll meet someone that you like and wants to do these things the same as you and etc. And then when you meet someone that you like and are actually kind of interested in, he trashes her. Well, and what that really is about is that with a lot of these people that, push the magic woman, they have an idea of the type of, or specifically of what kind of woman they think you should be with. And then if you are interested in one that is not to their liking, they push back on you. They have like this adverse reaction, even though they're the same ones who were criticizing you or upset or like making it a point of saying that you are like lacking something by not pursuing them or not being with one of them. So basically, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you are interested in a woman that they don't think is good enough for you or like personally, they'll insult her. And then if you're not bothering with them, you'll be told that there's, wait for the magic woman / you're doing something wrong. It's all just a damn pyramid scheme. And when I thought about her, I said, and again, this goes back to why I just don't even bother more often than not. Let's say she gave me her number, and then I spoke to her for probably a month, 2 months, and I asked her if, hey, can we, go? I wouldn't even phrase that as a date. I would say, hey, want to go see a movie or want to, whatever. I know that people think if you do anything with a woman, it's romantic, but I would say, hey, you want to go and like hang out or whatever. And let's say that she did, and then after doing that once, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, I asked her if she wanted to go on a date. And then let's say she agreed to that. And then after 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dates, she agrees to become a couple. And then, you and her are texting each other and calling and all the rest of it. And then one day you say, hey, would you ever want to have kids? And then she says no. I would say, well, hell, my interest in her just evaporated at that point. So basically, because of there being like a true large giant wave of these women who are anti-family, who are against having children, even if things with her had progressed to a point further of what I would have liked, there still is no guarantee, and there's almost a damn extreme likelihood that she would not reciprocate my long-term desires. Like maybe you can get her to go on a date, maybe you can get her to go and, I don't know, I've never cared much for banging, but it's not the biggest thing in the world to me, but let's say you get her to do that, but I don't want to ever have a family. It's like, okay, well, now I have to start all over again. And that's my point of how, because of just how many of them, with this whole stuff of them being so far away, and then how many of them are against having a family, they've really just created in me this view that you really have to just keep jumping through all these different hoops to get stuff that is still not what you want. But no, I bring up Triple L, and I bring up this relative, and him saying stuff like you're selling yourself short. And then at one point, he even tried to advise me against asking women if they want to have children, which I never do. They always reveal that to me. Usually what happens, if there's one I like romantically, she reveals it after the fact in like a roundabout way, where with this the Dear John letter writer, the one that was sitting up there in that apartment complaining about how expensive things were, and then when you offer to move down there with her, she's disinterested. She said that she thought kids were gross. She said she'd rather be shot in the face than have children. You know, all these like really crazy stuff that I only found out after uh, asking her, or saying I was interested in her. So I'm getting what I'm conveying is, even if you get what you want in the short term of like going on a date or whatever, in the long term, the likelihood of not getting what you want, whether that be marriage, children, is extremely high, because this is just a generation of women that are not interested in doing that. And as long as that's the case, I'm just not going to find it very appealing to jump through all of the different hoops and whatnot to try and court one of them, because I'll say, okay, well, at the end of this, I'm still not going to get what I want anyway, so why even bother? But yeah, when it comes to people like that relative, or Triple L, or any of the rest of them that do the whole, you must have done something wrong. I mean, they've telegraphed to us what they're going to do. When the magic woman never appears, they're going to blame me for it because it's always my fault. Even though I can't make women want to have kids, I can't make women want to get married. I don't have these powers that they like to perceive me as having the ability of. If one of them is against doing those things, that's some character trait that she picked up on her own, or with the influence of some other like-minded individual. But it doesn't have anything to do with me. All it does is just make me say, okay, I'm not even going to bother with any of this, because I know that at the end of that tunnel is something that's not appealing to me. So yeah, I'm very excited to meet more women who are against doing basically anything I'd want to do, while I get blamed for their actions. And I said this before, when it comes to the idea of meeting a woman who has the same long-term goals, right? Wants to get married, wants to have a family, if lives within driving distance of me, you are more likely to see me with 1 million subscribers and 1 billion views than to have that happen.